Welcome to Comics Bazaar, the channel of comics commentary and arcana. This video features the Uncanny X-Men number 265, cover dated early August 1990. So the cover here is by Andy Kubert, and it features de-aged or child Storm, last seen in Uncanny X-Men 256. And here she is facing off a bunch of these vampiric looking figures called hounds. And also to note, in the corner box here we have Havoc, not seen for a while in the comic, not seen since Uncanny X-Men 251, yet to turn up on the other side of the Siege Perilous. And this particular corner box illustration is by Jim Lee. So let's open this one up to the splash page. And the splash page, interestingly, is divided into 4 vertical panels by guest artist Bill Jaaska, returning from his illustration for illustration job on 263. Inked again by Joe Rubinstein. Chris Claremont as ever, writer, and then we have Joe Rosen lettering and Mike Rockwitz colorist. So quite the guest team on the art duties for this particular issue. So we've a bunch of narrative captions here about how there's a race of beings called the Ndyr, and they have been invited by the Shi'ar to send forth a champion here on this splash page. So this is an example of one of these Ndyr species. Going up against the Shi'ar's champion, just represented by this flash here, and losing. And so here, I like the way that Jaaska's done this with the Ndyr falling down to the planet, their native planet. And there's some kind of like strange version of our dinosaurs and or dragons, yes. And this one has a mate, life mate, as he or she says. And from the dialogue between them, we learn that the Shi'ar champion cracked his, let's say his for the sake of argument, psi shields as though they were the brittlest of eggshells. I was helpless against him. I could only watch while he roamed my mind at will. Every thought, dream, hope, terror, secret, all his for the taking. All in but a moment of time. I never imagined such power existed. Against it we are nothing. With it at her command, the mad Shi'ar Empress reigns supreme. So, who is the Shi'ar Empress? Is it Deathbird? Is it Lilandra? And who could this telepath be who is the Shi'ar champion? Well, this is a question that won't be answered until the Shi'ar saga, running through issues 274 to 277, reviews of which already exist on the channel. And then here's our second, so to speak, splash page, and the focus of the rest of our story. D.H. Storm here, who is exiting from burgling this particular house, which is a house owned by a guy who made his fortune strip mining companies, buying them up, gutting them of any asset worth the name, and who is acting as banker for a major cartel expansion into the American heartland. So a guy mixed up in the drugs business, and so she regards him as fair game, and she has embarked on a Robin Hood style of life here in Cairo, Illinois, and she thinks of her old Egyptian teacher in Cairo, Egypt, Ahmed. Dear old teacher, you would be proud. And we first learned of him in Uncanny X-Men 113, and here we have a bit of a dumb note by Bob Harris, translated from the Egyptian. There is no Egyptian language aside from ancient Egyptian. What he meant to write there is translated from the Egyptian dialect of Arabic, yes? So then D.H. Storm, who's prepubescent, maybe 12 years old or something like that, is not fully in possession of her mutant powers. She's half in possession of them. She can sort of fly, and so as she flies up here from the roof, but doesn't have full control, and she lands on this tree, but she needs to get out past the electrified wire. So she blasts it with her lightning power, but she doesn't have full control over it. So she tries to blast there, but it doesn't work. So she has to concentrate to do it. So this is all part and parcel of her being, you know, as I said, roughly 12 years of age in terms of her physical status. And then, because she injures her backside, falling off onto the ground from the tree, she has a bicycle parked there surreptitiously, but she's not going to be able to use the bike because she's hurt her backside so much that she's going to have to walk home. A little bit of a comic moment there as the house alarm goes. And but lo and behold, her use of her lightning power has tripped a different kind of alarm, one that has been set up by Nanny. And now she's identified where Storm is. And then we get this page here between Nanny and Orphan Maker. And Nanny explains what really happened at the end of Uncanny X-Men 248 when Havoc thought that he had blasted Nanny's ship, destroyed it, and killed Storm into the bargain. She says that Storm didn't understand her noble purpose. She was too full of being leader of the X-Men. That's why we had to regress her to childhood, to the innocent days when there was just a Roro, an orphan like yourself, Orphan Maker, desperately in need of a nanny to care for her. So Nanny's plan is that a Roro, once they capture her, will wear this outfit and be a little sister to Orphan Maker, who's not really interested in that. And then our scene shifts to the Mississippi Mall. Got an interesting piece of narrative caption here. These days seems like you can't have a town without one. Level upon level, store after store, piped air, stale muzak, pretty much indistinguishable on the inside from Southern California to South England. So an observation on the state of culture back in 1990, but now of course with the internet and Amazon and other big internet sellers, the mall just doesn't have the cultural status and function that it did back in 1990. So times change, yes. And then we have this interview here between this reporter and this police detective regarding the burglary of the house that we saw earlier, and how the owner of the house was brutally murdered because, you know, he was holding money for the cartel. When the money was stolen, they held him responsible. And so then we get some conversation about Jacob Rees, the FBI agent, and his investigation regarding the young runaway mutant that is taking the blame for the killing of one of the doctors of Cairo hospital. And here in the foreground we have this interesting figure sitting down for a burger and fries. And who does it turn out to be as the camera pulls back, except for young Storm, who's listening in and finding out what's going on in terms of the investigation into the house she burgled, but also herself. And it's interesting here that the detective here says, whatever you say about that girl though, weirdest description, brown skin, silver hair, blue eyes. Reese is worse. Man gives me the creeps. I'm glad to be rid of him. I hope he stays in Washington forever. So Storm heads away, and by the way, interesting to note, she heads away just here as the camera woman puts down her camera, and perhaps before she can see that Storm isn't going to turn up on the TV camera, because we saw that even de-aged Storm is still under Roma's spell and is not visible to cameras or any other form of technology. But here, this is a nice little transition. I hope he stays in Washington forever. And our next scene is Washington, D.C. and it's Val Cooper, who hasn't heeded the warning from Colonel Vajan in the previous issue, and now she is a puppet of Reese, who was possessed by the Shadow King. And this is Lian Shen, and she is now also one of his puppets. She was Storm's doctor in Cairo hospital. So, and what we learn here is that the Shadow King is most particularly interested in Mystique, first of all, and he now has access to Val Cooper's files. And Val is the National Security Advisor to the President for Superhuman Affairs, so he has files on all superhumans from the Avengers to superpowered mutants, and he's got access to that. And interesting little bit here where when he's talking, he's saying the files he's accessing first and foremost are the Executive Strike Team Freedom Force. And he says, I'm primarily interested in its leader Mystique and her Leman, the precognitive Destiny. But Val tells him that Destiny's dead. Now that's an interesting little word there, Leman. It's a Middle English word, it's a medieval English word, and it means sweetheart or beloved. So this is Claremont rather sneakily getting past Bob Harris, getting past Marvel Editorial at the time, that Destiny and Mystique's relationship is a romantic one, it's an erotic one. They are lesbian lovers. It is a word that an educated reader, a reader of Chaucer, would know. It's a word that turns up in Chaucer, in particular in Chaucer's Mansiple's Tale, the second last story in the Canterbury Tales collection, where the Mansiple goes off on a long digression about the meaning of the word leman and also its register. And if I had to put money on it, that is where I think Claremont probably got the word. But sneaky, getting that past Bob Harris there back in 1990. And then, as I said, Val explains that Destiny's dead. And so the Shadow King basically sends Val off to kill Mystique. But who he's really interested in is Aurora, is Storm. And he says here that now, and very soon now, one for whom the Shadow King has waited a human lifetime, Storm, yes. So then we pick up with Storm again in Cairo, Illinois, in an airplane graveyard, which is where she has set up home in one of the cockpits of one of the planes. And she goes into a kind of like a reverie dream where she remembers her parents, a picnic with her parents, and her American father, her Kenyan mother, and the father playing as though she's an airplane and flying. And so happy times for Aurora, but horrifyingly, her father's face turns into that of Jacob Reese and the Shadow King, and she recognizes, you're the evil one, the King of Shadows. Go away, give me back my daddy. And then her mother turns into Nanny in this dream, and they're fighting over her, tearing her apart, each having hold of one or other of her arms. So she's got like some kind of warning from her dream about what's coming for her. But the horror of it and the nightmare of it shocks her into an instinctive use of her mutant powers, which lifts the plane off the ground, and lightning flashes as well before the plane falls to the ground again. And she's quite perturbed and frightened. And she also sees a vision in color hold here of the X-Men. So it's the Outback team mostly, and also herself, adult Storm. And as she thinks to herself, and who are these visions I see? One is so much like me, but each time I reach out to them, to her, they vanish, leaving me aching inside worse than before. So she's inklings, subconscious inklings of her former identity, but not fully available to her. So she's not amnesiac like Ali was when she came out of the Siege Perilous, or like Colossus was. This is a different situation, but it's all on account of Nanny's tinkering with her and turning her into a child, yes? And then we see these papers here reporting on a major art theft on the one hand, and a little feature on the richest man alive in some kind of Illinois type magazine. And Storm thinks to herself, there's only one sure antidote for misery: action. So who is going to be the next target of one of her Robin Hood style heists? Well, then we switch to this particular lakeside mansion, and we have a conversation here between Lian and Shadow King, where basically he set a trap for Storm. He has gone to precisely that guy's house, and the guy is a rich man, yes, but his art collection is all stolen art, and even the Shadow King is snobbish about the guy's wine collection. He's drinking it, but he has ascertained from probing the guy's mind that he didn't pick the wine himself, and so on and so forth. So this is the man and his wife and their bodyguards that he has psychically turned into hounds. And his plan is that they're going to run Storm to ground when she inevitably tries to burgle the house. And Lian asks him, what did you do to them? And he says, the mind is a magnificent instrument. Now, you, headblind rather, can't even begin to conceive of the possibilities, and all its secrets and all its untapped potentials, for good and ill, are mine to play with. As I tapped the wickedness latent deep within your psyche, dear Lian, did I unleash the animal in theirs. Neither restraint nor hesitation, no moral boundaries, only the overwhelming desire to do my will. And why this obsession with Storm, she asks. And this is interesting. He says, long ago she was promised me. And she responds, you mean she's the one who got away? And that's interesting because we don't get that backstory from Claremont in the original run regarding what exactly is the origin of the Shadow King's interest in Storm. She was promised to him long ago. And my little theory is it something to do with Ashake? Is it something to do with one of Storm's Egyptian priestess ancestors? Is that something that is being hinted at here, but not fully developed because of Claremont's abrupt departure from the series in 1991? In any case, at this point, one of the hounds gets scent of an intruder, and of course it's Storm arriving, using her semi-control over her powers to float into the roof. And just as she arrives on the rooftop, she's attacked by the wife of the homeowner, and then she falls through the skylight, but luckily lands on a bed. And she notes in her thoughts that the woman doesn't have any skill or training. She's just lashing out wildly. So Storm grabs this lamp post, and a wooden lamppost, and whacks her unconscious. But it's not enough, because she's scratched, and then there are these other hounds appear, and then of course the Shadow King makes his entrance, and telling her that she hasn't a hope, or she hasn't a prayer of escaping from his trap. And he says, right, fight as hard as you wish, by all means. I'll savor every entertaining moment, but in the end, come what may, and for all eternity, you will be mine. So that's quite the cliffhanger. And then our little caption is next, Gambit, out of the frying pan. But at this stage, who knew what Gambit actually meant? And then in the letters page, it's interesting because we learn in the letters page that Jim Lee is coming on board as a penciler, regular penciler for the comic. And something here in the answer to the last letter, Mr. Lee to pencil the book. Okay, so he is definitely coming on board here. Oh yeah, it says it here. Starting with issue 268, Jim Lee will be taking over as regular penciler of the X-Men. So at this point, he's already on board, already involved with the X-Office and getting ready for 268. Now, of course, the way that things worked out, he was contacted by Bob Harris and asked whether he and his studio could turn around Uncanny X-Men 267 in a week. That was the deadline, and he and the studio did that. But he had already begun work on 268, which was his official start issue. So there you go. I hope that you enjoyed this review and commentary on Uncanny X-Men 265. If you did, please like the video and stay tuned for more content like this.